Hello and welcome to another video. So we're playing some Artifact Portal this time around, as Artifact Portal is still probably one of my favourite Portal decks. Puppets are extremely strong, but personally I do just enjoy playing some artifacts here and there, as they are quite an enjoyable deck to play. I wish I had the new Legendary. I would love to test him out. Unfortunately I just don't have any, so we are playing a pretty generic artifact deck. I mean, that's pretty much what it does. It is more control orientated and combo orientated, focusing on securing board and then beating people down with either Sylvia or Saphira, just doing little chip damage or big burst damage in one big turn. So hopefully that will work out pretty well, and we're going to get right into it and check it out. So the first matchup is actually against Haven, probably one of the weaker matchups normally, as Haven does do a fairly good job at controlling itself along with healing, so it's nice that we get to play against that as our first game. Our starting hand is actually pretty reasonable, although it is a little clunky. If I don't have another 2-drop to play against Haven, I'll probably be forced to play the Hamlin, as I don't really see many other options going forward for that one. So starting off, of course, with the meta production, that was a pretty obvious play, making sure to throw an artifact into the deck reasonably consistently. Jeweled Priestess, getting to come down, I don't mind that at all. I mean, Jeweled Priestess does her job pretty nicely, but we are going to want to counter that with the Hamlin, so I do decide to duplicate the Machine Soldier. While I could have held on to the Hamlin, done nothing, played the Machine Soldier next turn, and then had a good turn 4, if I had have done that, I would have just let them kind of run me over long term, and that wouldn't have been a good way to go, especially if they happened to have Summit, which would have been dangerous. So I get a chance to play Soldier, because we are pulling Analyzing Artifact. So it's definitely not a bad one to go with. It looks like they're really pushing this heavy draw, which means they probably don't have what they need yet. And our Icarus is going to be a fairly decent play. It is going to allow us to pretty much secure our hand reasonably well, get us those artifacts that we're going to need to use for later on, while at the same time getting that little bit of damage in. So really it's just a matter of, can they remove this board now? And if they can they do it well? So this is going to guarantee at least the double clear. It's just a matter of what they hit. Although they do basically instantly lose this Darkhind, so maybe not the best play for them to have to do on 5. I know they would have preferred to have gone with a Tenko if they had one, but I mean, it's definitely not the worst possible play they could have made. After all, they did manage to remove my two really good followers there, forcing me with this Justice Magister Lion, which I actually like Magister Lion. I really can't go wrong with that card. We've got plenty of artifacts, plenty of rush damage. We've got some nice draw power, and we've got the Saphira, so our current hand is actually pretty decent. There isn't much that would be much better. Father of Punishment, though, does get a perfect double clear. Kind of disappointing. I mean, Father of Punishment does do a wonderful job of getting rid of things, but I really would have liked to have kept my board for a little bit longer if I could have. Another Analyzing. I do decide to throw the Lion, though, just to pump a couple more cards into the deck. And it's got a little bit better body. They are out of Evos though, which is a positive. I mean, if they don't have an Evo to use, we should be fine. And they are focusing on healing by the looks of it, so that's really something we don't have to worry about too much. Ikarabe will give us our draws. Would have been nice if I had a rush effect going on, so I could use these Analyzings more effectively. That way I could just pump them out continuously and get the draw power off those. Not so lucky, didn't have the accelerate, so disappointing. But, I mean, we still get some decent damage out of this. We've got a pretty okay board. We are going to lose something immediately. Luckily it was the Analyzing Artifact, which is probably the worst thing to have on the board right now. And we did get our Acceleratium, so that does give us an absolutely crazy next turn. So we're actually going to be able to use the Excel Analyzing Artifacts and pretty quickly deal with this. We even have a fairly decent amount of options. So I decided to use the Ancient. I probably should have just went full on Excel and Analyzing and just dealt with them, but I mean, this way I can at least have a decent chance with these Analyzing Artifacts on board. Just gives us a little bit more board pressure than we probably would have had. So there's their Globe of Stairways. We haven't really gave them a turn where they could easily play anything decent, so at least that seems to be working well for us, putting a lot of pressure down. The Deus Ex Machina is good since we don't have Resonance active. If we did, I probably would have held off just to keep these spheres, but now it just presents a pretty hard board to deal with. The spheres are also at about, I think, 5 roughly, so they aren't super high, which is a little disappointing, but they should be high enough. Another globe, so they are really trying to get something to work with. They must really be struggling with this hand, which definitely works in our favour. So using the couple of drops we had there and a puppet, we can actually remove this. This does let us get just that little bit of extra damage, as our Saphira will have a reasonable attack power now. So a nice 10 damage total. Got us a couple extra damage than just using those 4 drops would have. Those 2 drops, sorry. And that did lead to the concede, which worked out fine for us. And our next match is Portal versus Portal. Definitely not a bad one for us to play. Most of the time they're going to be playing puppets, which this deck has a okay matchup against. It just really comes down to how you play, and a little bit of luck, of course, as most decks do. So far, I've found that versing puppets usually isn't too bad with these artifacts, as if you get the right cards, like the Iron Staff mechanic, you can do quite well. Although, you do still have to be fairly careful, because they can burst you down quite a bit, so you really want to try and keep your health total up as high as possible, which is what we're going to aim for here. Because the higher we can keep our health total, the better.
The battlefield belongs to humanity.
Especially since we don't run any kind of healing, which makes things a little harder, but a nice Iron Staff mechanic play. We got a perfect turn to use that. So it does allow us to at least put a couple of those wards into the deck. And they did force their use of the puppet. But Nicholas, great. So Nicholas isn't a card you want to fight on turn 4, at least not reasonably. So substitution, I mean, it did the job. Why not? We've already put a couple of wards into the deck, so the second Iron Staff mechanic, while good, is probably better with the Sylvia, because then I can just play the Icarus as well and get a decent artifact to use. Although I should have actually done the Evo, unfortunately I did accidentally just click end on my turn and completely skip it over. If I had have used the Evo, I could have used the Biofab on whatever I got and had a pretty decent next turn, pretty much no matter what I got. So while that was a little bit of a setback, we're still reasonably okay. We're going to get the Deus Ex Machina play, and we're going to be able to completely remove their board, so we're not really in too much trouble at this point. The Rombi really is no big threat to us, just because of how this deck functions and does fairly well on its own. Oh, and a new puppet. No, little puppeteer, go away. Ah, ruined our life with that bear. Still, not the worst possible play. We're pretty safe with what we can do. We don't really want resonance to happen, because, of course, we'll lose these spheres, and losing both these spheres here would probably be bad. So we get a chance to go for the substitution play. I should have clicked the Evo on the gold. Again, another slight misplay. It's just I dragged it to the wrong follower, which was quite disappointing. I was really hoping that I had have hit the 2 gold, that way at least I would have had a more consistent next turn instead. And I would have been able to deal with this 5-6 a little better than I'm going to have to. And unfortunately we end up with all 3 Saphiras and no way to get out of resonance, which is severely disappointing. It's definitely not where I wanted to be, as it did force me to waste a Saphira and then just basically go off. So we now have no Spheres to use, which is severely disappointing. Our opponent, of course, doesn't know that, but for us, that was our big kind of burst damage. Now we're basically going to be relying on pure control from this point forward. At least seeing the Oculus means they did just pump 3 puppets into their hand. Noah isn't really a huge threat right now, as it can't kill us yet.
You might say I'm a genius.
Icarus and a draw is plenty of extra cards. So again, keeping your health high is really what you need to be able to do against puppets at the moment. If they had had a double or triple Sylvia, we definitely would have lost this matchup, that's for sure, but that would require them having an almost perfect hand. And us having our own Sylvia actually gave us a little bit of help, because now we can actually rely on chip damage to really kind of finish this opponent off. Another Loco. I mean, how many of these guys are they going to play? Not that most of these cards are a huge threat. All we really need to do is just keep pumping the board with whatever we can. Fortunately, we didn't have many artifacts left, so that's a little bit of a downfall for us. But we can at least get a chance to throw the biggest followers possible to this board, and then redraw our hand completely. So they get their Noah out, which is pretty much forced to deal with the board at this point, because if they don't, they die. Or at least they would have been pretty dead right there. So that's good for us. It means they are wasting a lot of puppet potential, which means we have a better chance at winning this. It does mean the game drags on a bit longer. And I do decide to duplicate the Mystic artifacts in favor of anything else, just so that I can hopefully protect myself. I also need to make sure that I can stay out of Resonance this turn, because I really want to keep what we've got, because it's quite a nice hand to be able to deal with potential threats. And luckily that does lead to the concede anyway, obviously blocking off any potential damage, and continually pumping to the board did the job nicely. So if there is one thing artifacts have always done well, it's definitely board control. They deal a lot of damage, they can get potential burst, and they can really handle themselves in most encounters. The only real big threat becomes Forest with Brambles, but outside of that, even artifacts have really little threat to them for the most part. Of course, that doesn't mean you'll win every game, it just means they're reasonably consistent and pretty easy to get around other decks, because you can just pump out really wide boards really quickly, deal with a lot of things, play a lot of cards. Again, I really want to play with the new Legendary. Unfortunately, I don't have any. As soon as I do have some, I will definitely be throwing an artifact deck that focuses more on that, and that will be super interesting to play. So do keep an eye out for a video like that in the future. Hopefully you guys did enjoy this. If you did, deck list will be in the description below. Hit that like button and subscribe, and I'll catch you guys next time. See ya.